honestly, most of our conflict, so to speak, it's not that we haven't had conflict.
Exactly.
But most of it we can talk through and we realize it's just a misunderstanding because both of us have the same goal of we want to be connected and we want to be on the same team.
Yes.
And so whenever we come up against something, instead of going, okay, it's me versus you, there has to be one person who wins and one person who loses. We approach it as how can we both win? How can we win as a team? What do we do for the good of our marriage? How do we put that first? We've always had a foundation of like, hey, what can I do to serve you?
Oh, hi.
Hi. This is part of it.
Welcome to the podcast.
Oh, I didn't know who was starting.
Yeah, I hit record. Let me make sure it's
Oh,
recording. I think it is. Yeah, we're recording.
oh, I was just being goofy.
Same. How's your day?
It was good.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's the chill Saturday.
yeah, pretty
Yeah.
much.
Well, welcome everybody to my second episode, Fringe Faith Podcast. Originally, I was going to do this with my brother, but he figured that he wouldn't have the time to invest, and so he's just going to probably co-host with me occasionally. And I've decided since then that I'll have probably multiple co-hosts, and depending on what topic I'm covering that day, and just kind of feel it out from there. But I'm excited because today my guest is my wife, and we decided that it would be fun to tell our story. Um, Kind of pick up from last episode where I left off with my own personal testimony and with meeting her, and I figured we could tell a little bit of how that happened because God had his fingerprints all over it. And yeah, it's a fun story. So, what you think?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd say so.
So,
Worked out pretty well.
how did you find me?
Well, I think it probably would have been just about 2 years ago right now, because I
Hmm.
think I found you in February, probably, from what I can remember. Um, I was scrolling on Instagram one day and I follow an account called Fight the New Drug, and you were featured, I think, in one of their posts wearing their merch,
Hmm.
I think. And I was like, holy cow, who is that guy? And I I think that was you had two different Instagram accounts at that point,
Yes.
and the one that was tagged was your account that you used to write
Yeah.
a lot of your stuff. And so,
Good, I can't see you very well. And
well,
not
I'm
that
not gonna
anybody's
see
gonna be
us.
on YouTube. Well, I'll post some of this on Instagram.
All the grandparents on YouTube, maybe.
Yeah.
Do
And
young people still
some
watch YouTube?
yeah. And some clips will end up on Instagram.
Ah, okay. Well,
So people can at least see what's going on here.
yeah, so I think the account that was linked was the account where you were writing and you had a
Yes.
bunch of that stuff on there. And so I started looking through your posts. Um, Mind you, I never find guys to date like this. I don't usually troll the interwebs for men, but you just really caught my eye for some reason. And so I was looking through your posts and I could tell that you weren't married. I got down far enough that there was a post I think that you had written about your divorce a little bit.
Uh-huh.
So I knew that you had been married at some point, but I was being the FBI and could tell that you didn't have a ring on anymore. And I was like, oh, he's probably one of those guys that doesn't post if he has a girlfriend. And so I couldn't tell if you did or if you didn't. But um, I found out too that like you were Christian and figured out I think that you went to YWAM based on some of the context of the posts that you were writing. And at that point, I was still at ministry school at Bethel, and so I was like, oh, interesting. he's kind of probably run in some similar circles before, and so um, at the end of the day, at the end of the deep dive into your Instagram page, it's like I will follow this guy. I like the way that you wrote, and you had some good posts in there, and you wrote about the Lord, and so I was like, okay, I'll just follow this guy. Um, and I think at that point, I didn't maybe realize that you had another page,
Hmm.
your
Yeah.
personal page. Yeah. Um, I think that was probably a few more weeks, and maybe you ended up posting to your stories or something about your personal page, and so I ended up following you there too.
Yeah.
But I don't think that you had followed me back at that point. I was just following both accounts.
No. My life is because of Instagram, let's be honest. I met the guys that go fast because of Instagram. And because of that, I decided to move into a van because it's mostly Instagram. I found the van lifers stuff and figured it was a viable way to live. And then met Rob at Flag and moved up there because of Instagram. Well, and YouTube, but for him, but he and I connected through Instagram, and then yeah, later on, I she starts following me because of Instagram. My entire life right now is because of Instagram.
Funny how you now want to like kind of get rid of Instagram a little bit,
A little bit. I'm
or just do
caught.
it less, I guess.
Yeah, I'm caught between the enjoyment of the tool and the hate of the vice.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
you can get sucked into it and lost really, really quickly.
Yep, and the direction
Doom
technology
scroll
is
forever.
going. Yeah, and the direction technology is going, I'm not in love with.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and the more I learn about the way things used to be versus how they are now, I'm like, let's go back to the old ways. But
Yeah.
but yeah, no, it's funny because I remember that photo I took while I was in Montana, and part of the reason why I even took that photo, like I bought some of that
The
apparel
merch.
from the merch
The merch.
from Fight the New Drug because at the time I remember the Lord had said, He's like, until you can start to overcome uh this addiction fully, which, I had been on and off for years.
Hmm.
He said, you won't meet your person until you do. And so I was like, well, maybe one way that I can really hold myself accountable to it is if I buy some of this stuff and I wear it and I post and talk about it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I did.
Yeah.
And then months later, I'm living in St. Louis and you found me because of it, which is hilarious.
Yeah.
I remember when she followed me, I always paid attention to everything because I was like a bit of a micro influencer. I guess I still kind of could be considered that,
You paid
even though
attention to all your followers.
I paid attention
New
to
follower today.
a little bit more so like, oh, this is a real person versus a bot because a lot of times I try to filter out bots,
Yeah,
but
yeah, that's
also
fair.
I would pay attention to who paid attention to my stories.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing you, and you didn't post a whole lot, so I didn't.
No. I, on the other hand, am not an influencer of any kind.
It's not entirely true. You influence the people around you.
Oh, yeah.
You're
I'm
just
not a
not a
social media influencer at all,
exactly,
period.
exactly. So she didn't post very much. I couldn't tell a lot about her.
It's a woman of mystery.
A little bit, yeah.
You had
And
to ask questions if you wanted to know something.
it's true. And I could tell you were Christian. I knew that you had done a video about your missions and stuff like that. So I knew you were a
Oh, yeah.
person of faith. And I think I picked up somewhere that maybe you were at Bethel. And so I thought, oh,
She's one
she's
of
one
those
of,
crazy Christian girls.
not even that, just vanilla.
Oh my God.
That's kind of what I expected was like the typical, oh, I'm super churchy. And I had kind of come out of that into the wild, so to speak. I was living amongst motorcyclists that are a little more, I don't even know what to say about it that because it's not bad per se, and it's not great on the other hand, it's just very different. And a lot
Yeah.
of the church, especially people that I would think of that might go to Bethel for a school would be a little bit more averse to that, if it makes sense. Like I would be a little bit too wild or too abrasive for most people that I would consider, you know, the Bethel school type person. And that's just what I figured. So I assumed maybe you
Little
were
did
like
you
that.
know what the school is like.
Right. But
Everybody there is crazy.
it's a joke. Joke, folks. Jokes.
Kind of, but not really.
A little bit.
Everybody's got to be a little bit crazy to go to Bethel,
That's
honestly.
true. It's a different kind of
It
crazy.
is. It is.
That's a good crazy, but
Everybody marches to their own drum a little bit. To
oh,
some degree,
yeah.
everybody's got a little bit of that vein there, but
Yeah. But
in a good way
yeah.
most of the time.
But I kind of that, and I think I had figured out that you were a bit younger, so I
Yeah.
was unsure about that because I had dated younger and I had married younger
How old were
before.
you at the time? 24.
Yeah, I guess so.
24.
So, and I'm at the time what
32.
32, 32.
32.
So old enough that I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, because I had been burned by younger before in the fact that like life differentiation, life experience, all that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, I'm not, whatever. Um, but you commented on something I
You
had,
had, I think on your, I don't remember which page it on, but it was
it would
on,
have been
but
my main one.
you had made a video of your van, and I think you were doing like a workout or something, and you
Bench press or
were,
something.
yeah, but you, for the people that don't know your page, I guess,
Yeah. A few
you have
unfortunately
a,
would.
yeah, you have
Squat and
a
bench rack.
squat, yeah, a squat and bench rack that is built onto the back of the van so that wherever you go, you have a gym that just rolls with you.
Yes.
And so I think I commented something like,
That's
"Oh,
dope.
it's so cool that you have like your own workout set up like on your van, like your own gym set up on your
Mhm.
van." And it wasn't like and a smiley face. Like it wasn't anything.
It was just like, that's really cool.
Yeah, it was just like, "Oh, that's cool."
Which, because it is.
Yeah.
And
And I think you commented back like within a minute or a few minutes, which I didn't realize at the time like that was normal for you.
addiction.
He just sits there and waits after he posts, see
No,
who
I
likes
was
his. No,
probably
I'm
scrolling at
kidding.
the time.
I'm kidding. But you responded really quickly, and I was like, oh, he responded to my comment so quickly. Interesting. My heart is racing now.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Well, for some reason,
I
she and
think
I
maybe you didn't
started.
follow me or something.
Yeah. Well, no, I don't know that I
Because you
did.
you were watching my stories before.
Because it show up as people who watched my
What
stuff, so I
did you
would click.
say? I think you were secretly intrigued.
Maybe a little. Uh, enough that I'd like see what was going on. Partially, I think also you didn't post hardly anything, so I was like,
No, I
I wonder
mostly
what
just
this
post in
lady's
my
about.
stories. If I post something, usually it's in my stories,
Exactly. So I
not
would
in like my actual feed.
occasionally hit on your thing
Yeah. What's she doing now?
and oh, there's something about you. I
Yeah.
kind of am getting the feel for you. And
Yeah.
she posted something hilarious about a guy that was hitting on her at work because she deals
No, it
with,
wasn't the guy. It was his
oh,
mom.
it was his mom.
I work in a skilled nursing facility and skilled rehab facility as a therapist, and
Mhm.
I had a patient. Most of the population is older, and she was trying to set me up with her 54-year-old son, and she was like, "Oh my gosh, I think that you guys would just be great together." And I was like, "Well, I don't know. Like my dad's 54. Like
No,
I'm good." Because she's like, "Are you single?" And I was like, "Ugh. I don't want to lie, but this is one of those instances I feel like I should." And I was like, how do I get out of this? No, not really. I was like, oh, that's okay. I'm good. And I think I had posted about it on my stories just as a joke. I was
yes.
like, yeah, when your patient tries to set you up with her 54-year-old son. I think you
I thought it was
responded to it. You
hilarious.
thought it
I
was super
did.
funny. And you were like, yeah, but is he rich though? And I was like, no, I was getting more he lives in my basement and I want him out type vibes,
Which was funny,
which was funny.
and I laughed. And lo and behold, we start messaging back and forth. And I think I followed you around then.
Hmm.
Yep. And then
I
I
think we
thought you
talked for
were
like 4 hours straight that day. We were doing
just,
voice memos back and forth.
oh, that's right. Yep.
And
I thought you were funny,
yep,
which
I kept you laughing for
was
4 hours.
was a plus,
Yep.
but I still wasn't sure.
Oh no, obviously.
I wasn't sure if I should put any attention in that your direction.
Whatever.
But no, it was fun. It was good. I had also been out of a relationship recently enough that sucked. That was also, I guess it was one of those things where afterwards I was like, why is this my habit? Why do I pick people like that have
We're
no
super
emotional
broken.
capable, yeah,
Yeah.
or that who don't have the emotional capability to, handle their stuff well or
Hmm.
gracefully. And I was trying to figure out what it was about me that had the pattern because obviously we all have patterns when it comes to what we pick a lot of times.
Hmm.
And so I was trying to work through some of that and figure that out. I was also in a season where I felt like the Lord was really beckoning me into a certain frame of mind and certain place. So I was dealing with all that. And so after you and I had chit-chatted for a little while, probably like a month, you called me out.
Yeah, because I was driving back home across the country
Mhm.
because school had ended. So it would have been in May. Um, I think at that point we had been kind of talking for a month. I was driving back across the country with a friend of mine.
Midday, midweek, while I was
Well,
working.
I don't know that it would have made a difference if you were working or not. But
Oh,
anyway, we
it,
were driving through and we were going straight through St. Louis, which is where he was at the time. And I was like, man, it'd be kind of cool if we could like meet up for like coffee or something. And honestly, there was part of me that's like, I want to get like I want to meet him in person so that I know if I'm wasting my time or not. There's a little bit of that going on that was like,
because you were clearly interested in me at that time. Or
I was interested enough to entertain the idea
okay.
of it. I wouldn't say that I was sold. There were still a
Right.
lot of question marks in my mind,
Obviously.
but honestly, it's so hard to get to know somebody completely online. And like, even though I think we had maybe talked on the phone a time or two, or um, we sent voice memos back and forth quite a bit, but there were still a lot of question marks. And I was like, man, I feel like if I could meet him in person, like I could feel him out a lot more.
Yeah.
Um, I wasn't concerned about like, oh my gosh, am I going to be attracted to him? Like, stuff like that. But um, that question was already answered. But yeah, I wanted to meet you partially because I'm like, I don't want to waste my time. Because up to that point, like I felt like most of the times that I had been dating people, with the
Mhm.
exception of one relationship, like I'd felt like a lot of it was like wasting my time in a way.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I had just gotten to the point that like I was genuinely happy being single and um honestly maybe also was a little bit like fed up with the whole dating scenario and like
Hmm.
just the whole situation in general and being able to find good men and like men that were actually manly and not super passive.
Hmm.
Um, where I was at in life at that point, like I was surrounded by mostly those types of men, and so I was just over it. So
Yeah.
it's like I don't want to waste my time if this isn't actually like somebody that I would really truly be interested in.
Yeah.
So I tried to meet up with you. I was passing through. I was like, "Hey, where's the best coffee in town?" And you were like, "I don't know."
I didn't.
Which I think is ridiculous because you drink so much coffee.
I make it myself. And I was not in a place where I had a lot of money to go out and do stuff.
Yeah, that's fair. But yeah, you literally were like, "I don't know." And I was like, "Okay, well, I guess I'll have to stop and find out and let you know." And you were like, "Yep, guess you will." And I was like, I'm so confused because like I felt like, this guy, like we're talking back and forth. I feel like there's at least some level of interest on your level at that point. I'm like, either I'm stupid or he's interested, but he's not jumping at the chance to meet me. Like, this is a little strange. Like,
Yeah.
and I didn't know at that point. I'm like, am I one of am I one girl that you're interested in and like you're kind of playing the field trying to figure it out? And are you actually interested in me, but there's a reason that you're not saying it? Like,
Hmm.
I didn't know exactly what was going on. And so drove through, didn't stop for coffee, by the way. Um, I was like, just keep driving. Um, and then once I got back to Ohio, I ended up texting you, messaging you one day and was like, okay, what's the deal? We talk every day. Are you interested? Like, I am curious to see if this could go somewhere.
Yeah.
Are you in that same boat at all? Like, where are you at, basically?
Hmm. And I basically responded with, I'm not interested, but I just got out of something and I'm not there. I'm not ready. And
Yeah.
I think if I remember correctly, you were like, are you serious?
No, I didn't say that to you.
You didn't, but I feel like you probably, I felt like you probably came off like, are you serious? This is a cop-out answer.
Honestly, I was like, okay, this gives me a little bit more clarity because, okay, I'm not crazy. Like, you are, it's not that you're not interested, because I think that's what you said. You said something like, it's not that I'm not interested, but I don't feel like I'm in the space to
Hmm.
even be able to explore that. I just got out of a relationship, I got burned.
Yeah.
Um, and there was a lot, I think you were a little gun shy because I remember a lot of our conversation was me asking you a lot of questions, you explaining yourself, you kind of explaining what your life has been like, and you saying things like, "Oh, in general, I just feel like I'm too much for people, and it takes a certain person to really understand me," and all this stuff. And I remember saying things like, "Hey, you're not too much." And you would say back, you'd be like, "Respectfully, you don't know me." And I was like, "Respectfully, you don't know me." But whatever. But I think you were definitely gun shy, so it helped explain at that point. I was like, okay, you are kind of interested, but you're not in a place where you can actually
Hmm.
pursue something.
Hmm. Yeah, I was dealing with sort of my process, but then also I think there had been plenty of times in the past where uh even people that I was sure I was willing to go invest time into, oftentimes it would come back with like, oh, I am too, like the message I would get would be that I was too much in some way, shape, or form. And so when you were like, you're not too much, I was like, you don't know that. Like,
Yeah,
you haven't actually met me. You don't know that.
yeah,
And I don't believe it. Funny enough, apparently I'm not too much for you,
yeah,
which is good for me.
yep.
But at the time, I didn't, I wasn't gonna just take that at face value because people say it all the time.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
Um,
And I think that I had kind of known that too. I was like, he doesn't know me well enough to know that like what I'm saying actually carries weight behind it.
yeah,
Like he doesn't know that about me.
yeah.
So it's like I get it. Like he's probably had people tell him this before. And even though I'm like, bro, just believe me,
Well,
you know?
also, I had told you a lot of things about what I wanted out of life,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I wasn't asking a lot of questions of you
No, you weren't asking any questions about me.
because, especially at that point, I didn't want to lead you on. I didn't want to give you false hope.
Even though you weren't really not doing that either. You were still like, I need you to stay close enough that in case, just in case.
Well, more so, I knew your humor, and so I would send you things I thought were funny.
Yeah, we sent a lot of memes back and forth for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But yeah. Well, this is sort of where Holy Spirit kicked in. So,
Oh no, Holy Spirit was there the whole time.
okay, fair enough. But where he came in clutch, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, up until that point, the other thing that I knew was um the previous relationships that I had been in, the vast majority of them, I had felt like I was the one that was kind of like pursuing and pushing things along and like um I hadn't really dated a guy who was like, "Hey, I really want to be with you and I'm gonna like put in the effort
Hmm.
um and so but that's the only thing that I had known up until that point. So I knew how to like chase a guy into a relationship, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But the Lord had told me when I had gotten out of the last relationship, situationship deal that I had been in
Hmm.
that had lasted like 3 years going on and off, and I had come out of it, and the Lord was like, "No, you will be pursued by your husband." And but the thing is you actually have to create space for that to happen if you're so close to it's like if you're like leading an animal, like they don't really have the chance to follow unless you actually walk forward and create that space for them to follow you. If you're just right there, like they're not gonna move.
Yeah.
And so the Lord was like, you actually have to allow that empty space, which felt really scary and foreign to me, um, to allow a man to pursue me. And so, even when we were talking, like I was asking you a lot of questions about you, and every once in a while, like I would throw in some information about me, but like Holy Spirit would remind me, like, hey, you don't need to throw in everything. Like, don't give him too much. Like,
Yeah.
he's got to work for it a little bit.
Yeah.
Don't just throw everything out there and let him decide if he wants it, because like he needs to do some legwork to get there.
Yeah. Yeah. And since I wasn't doing that, you kept having to keep from,
Yeah.
but
It was really tempting for me to just throw it out there and be like, hey, you've basically told me what you're looking for, and I know that that's me, but you don't know that, but I'm also not going to tell you that. But I
yes.
really wanted to. And to be like, listen, I'm all you've ever dreamed of and more, but your head's too far up your butt, so you don't know that yet because you haven't asked any questions.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
But again, at that point, I didn't want to like lead you on too much. That was
yeah,
part of it. 'Cause I was not ready and I wasn't sure.
right,
I
right.
also there was the catch 22 of some of it was I did know that I was like, I don't know very much about her. Like I'm not sure if she's this way or this way or this way or that way
Hmm.
and because I didn't ask any questions.
Yeah,
But if I had, then maybe I would have started being intentional sooner. But I do
yeah,
feel like the Lord really had me in an intentional process and had you and I really I guess, committed to a relationship or to pursuit or whatever sooner, I don't know that I would have completely gone through that entire thing.
yeah, yeah. I think it
Um,
was necessary for sure.
yeah, and I still had to come to a point where, for me, the Lord had to work in me the realization that, like, even though I've done a lot of really, um, not stellar things. And I had lived life and been broken and what I felt like was damaged. And I didn't feel pure and all that stuff.
Hmm.
I had to go through that process of the Lord literally one day. I was praying through it and like mostly you actually at the time in the Lord. Uh,
Like you're talking to the Lord about me.
and I would,
Well, before that,
okay.
I think because once you told me like, hey, I can't pursue you,
Yeah.
like I can't do anything right now. I think I told you, hey, like I'm good if,
To be friends.
yeah, I'm good to just be friends. That's totally
Mhm.
fine. No worries. Like
Yeah.
no harm, no foul.
Yeah.
And you had kind of pulled away a little bit, but
Yes.
then I was like caught in this situation where I was like, I actually don't really want to be friends. But the Lord was like, you told him that you could be friends. Like, can you actually be there and be a friend to him when he needs a friend, or
Yeah.
are you only in it to see what you can get out of it? Like if there's a relationship waiting for you at the end of this.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. But then I think it had just come up one day that like we were just talking about, I don't know, maybe your past or whatever,
Hmm.
and your story. And somehow it came up that I was a virgin. And I
Yeah.
think I just told you straight out. And you were like, oh, okay. And I mean, it wasn't like awkward.
Superhero.
Christian superhero. No. But I think it just came up naturally and it wasn't like an awkward conversation.
Right.
But like at that point I was like, well, I just played that card on the table. I don't know if I should have done that or not, but I was like, I don't know, whatever. And
Yeah.
so I think at that point you realize like, oh,
Yeah.
this girl is like,
Yeah. So that further solidified the whole like, oh, she's a certain type of lady in my mind.
yeah,
Yeah. And I'm not a stellar guy, so
that's what you thought.
that's what I thought.
Yeah,
That's sort of, I
not
mean,
true,
I
but
knew I was like a good guy. I knew that
you had just made
there
some bad decisions
was
in your past
yes,
that
but
you still felt like shame about.
I also felt like I couldn't be well understood unless the person I was
Yeah,
with had been through
a
something
similar,
similar,
yeah,
right? Which is a bold-faced lie. I didn't know that at the time.
right.
But
That's when
while
you were having that conversation with Lord.
yes,
Sorry.
yes, but
Back to that.
but for a few months there, you had to not tell me things because
Yeah.
you were trying she told me she wanted to be forward, but the Holy Spirit would tell her you can't say that often.
Yeah. Yeah. There were times that like I was really tempted to like you would say something and I wanted to throw in a line that was like kind of flirty
Hmm.
and Holy Spirit would stop me and be like, "Would you send that to one of your guy friends?" I was like, "Oh, I really wouldn't." And he would say to me, "Okay, well then you can't send that because you promised to be his friend." And I was like, ugh, okay. And so there were so many times I typed something out and I would erase it. Or there would be a time that I wanted to like volunteer information about myself because
Hmm.
I knew that it would match what you were looking for. And I was like, maybe I can catch his interest if I say this or whatever. And Holy Spirit would say, nope, he didn't ask you for that information. And so it became this thing that in me, the Holy Spirit was taking me through a process of what does it look like to actually be pursued and how many times I would think that I was being pursued or convince myself that I was, but I was throwing like leading lines out to the guys.
Yeah.
And like in reality, I was initiating it and they were just responding, but I was taking that as pursuit instead of letting a man like initiate it and then responding and going back and forth,
Yeah.
which I don't necessarily think is always a no-no, but for me in the process that I was in, because I that was my go-to. And I think honestly it also revealed the lie that I was believing that like no guy would ever pursue me.
Hmm.
And so I always just had to go after them myself. It kind of revealed that that was also what I was believing too.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm glad because then it gave me room to once I did decide to pursue,
Yeah.
it gave me room to do the legwork and all that. But
Yeah.
I had
You were
been
going through a lot during that time too.
yeah.
And I knew that. I
Hmm.
think in June
Yep.
you had a close friend of yours commit suicide
Yes.
and um I knew that you were really going through it
Hmm.
and it's really close to like it hit me really hard because I had a brother who had have a brother who had attempted suicide and had dealt with a lot of like depression and stuff
Hmm.
um and so um my heart just like broke for you and I remember like nights that I would fall asleep like praying and weeping for you and just like really asking the Lord to comfort you in those times and um show up there because I knew that you were by yourself
Yeah.
for the most part too.
Yep.
So going through something like that being on your own.
Yeah.
Um, I knew that you were going through a lot during that period of time too. So I was like, okay, I want to be a good friend. But yeah.
Yeah. No, it was a good season of it was the first time, I think I said this last time, it was the first time where I was in a season that I was alone a lot, but I didn't feel super lonely.
Yeah.
Um, and the Lord just kept meeting me there and revealing things and helping me to become what I say unjaded.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was great, but there was a point after a handful of months of after or whatever, I was praying about it and I had that feeling of like I need somebody that's as broken as I am and I'm not that pure and whatever. And I felt the Lord just say to me, like, haven't I made you pure? And I was like, yeah. And then he goes, do you think maybe you need somebody that isn't so broken instead of somebody that's super broken?
Mhm.
Yeah, I guess probably. I know you're right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that was when I was like, okay, maybe I should actually start to invest in getting to know you.
Mhm.
And funny enough, you at the time, unbeknownst to me, were about to basically terminate our friendship.
Yeah. Yeah. I had gotten to the point that um I I realized like, okay, if I'm honest with myself, I'm really not content and okay with just being his friend.
Mhm.
And what I really want is a relationship because like the more I got to know you, the more I learned about you, the more we talked, the more I was like, I really like my feelings are growing for this guy um and I think too the last relationship I had been in, there was a lot of time because it was so off and on, the times that it was off, like I would lie to myself and be like, oh no, I can be his friend. And really, it was just a way for me to manipulate the situation so that I would keep him in my life, even though like my heart was really damaged in that process because I wasn't actually caring for my own heart.
Yeah.
I was pretending that I was fine living one way, being friends, and I really wasn't. And so I was like, okay, I'm not doing that again. Like I thought that I could be friends and I really want to be his friend. And up until that point I had felt like the Lord was like, do you trust me? Like, stay in this. And he never told me, like, hey, at the end he's gonna choose you. Like there wasn't any promise that I was holding on to necessarily. But like when I would talk to Holy Spirit about you, he would just say, like, do you trust me?
Yeah.
You know? And I'd be like, well, yeah, I do. And so he's like, okay, stay the course. Ugh, crap. Okay. But I got to one day and there were things that were revealing that to me. Like I would notice that I was upset at the end of the day if I didn't hear from you.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, I'm never upset if one of my guy friends doesn't text me. Like I can go weeks and not hear from them and I never worry about the health of our friendship.
Hmm.
With you, I was like, oh no, maybe he's not interested anymore. I don't know. And so there were like things like that were tipping me off that I'm like, okay, my heart is really not okay with being just friends.
Yeah.
And so, and I'm like, okay, it's been a couple months since I asked him about that. He seems like he's getting into a different fate, like a different spot in life, but like he hasn't really said anything, and I'm not gonna bring it up again because I don't want to be that girl that's like, hey, I know I asked you already if you were interested and you told me no, but I'm gonna ask you again. Like I wasn't gonna do that. And so I told the Lord, I was like, okay, I have given you plenty of time to work this out.
Yep.
I've given you 2 months. That's plenty. I'm out. And I was like, okay, Lord, tomorrow I'm telling him that my heart cannot handle being his friend. And if he thinks that I'm some crazy girl from ministry school somewhere that's whatever, it's fine.
Hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
I've got to be I've got to actually take care of my heart and not
Mhm.
run it into the ground this time.
And so that day,
The next day,
the
yeah,
next
when I
day,
was planning on,
when she was planning on
you sent me so
letting
much
me
stuff
down.
that day. Oh my gosh, it was so annoying because all day I'm getting notifications. It's like Thomas Neal sent you something. Thomas Neal sent you something. Thomas Neal. And I was like, bro, where you been? And I was like, I'm not opening any of this. And I didn't. Like all day, I didn't respond to you.
Until
And then
evening.
in the evening, and I was like, okay.
Yep. And so then
And I was kind of
you
like, I don't know. I was kind of holding back a little bit, but
yeah, but you and I got to talking about some different things and I asked you about I was like, you ever heard of this weird demonic thing that this other person that I know is asking me about? And you're like, yeah, I've heard about it, it's that and the other. And I was like, I was talking about somebody else, and I was like, yeah, they're coming on to me all the time, but I'm not really interested. And then I was like, oh, by the way, remember
speaking of
I
which,
said, remember when I said that I wasn't ready or something like that?
no, I don't even think that you started with that. I think you were like, you had basically said, this girl is interested in me, but I'm not interested in her, but she's not really taking no for an answer. And then you were like,
Speaking of,
which, by the way, and then I was like, bro, I haven't been coming on to you. Please don't. I was like, ugh. Because then you didn't respond for like 5 minutes, and I was like,
I
yeah.
was trying to word it well.
Oh my gosh. I was literally panic pooping in the bathroom because I was like, oh, why does this guy think that he needs to tell me no again? Like I heard him the first time. I haven't been coming on to him. I haven't really even been flirting with him. Like please just let me down easy and just let it go. Like I'm not going to be that girl. Like please don't humiliate me like this. And be like, "Yeah, you keep doing the same thing and I'm not interested. I don't think that you understand. I'm not.
That's funny that you thought I was gonna do that.
I knew it was either going to be one way or the other. You were going to be like, "Hey, I'm interested," or you were going to be like, "You're basically being like that girl." And
Please stop.
I'm peacing out. Yeah, please stop. It's like I haven't been crazy. I know that I haven't been crazy.
That's funny.
Yeah.
So basically, I was just like, yeah, uh,
It was a super long,
dealing with
rambling
whatever
message.
and la da 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 da. I don't like when I said that I was interested, but I couldn't. Well, still interested. Would you like to see if this could go somewhere?
And I was like, "What?" I literally to the Holy Spirit, I was like, "Are you kidding me?" Literally the day that I was like, "I'm letting this guy. I'm cutting the line,
That's the
letting
day.
this fish go."
Yeah. You
I
gotta be
was like, "Are
kidding.
you kidding?"
Kind of timing.
I was like, "Today?" And I think I even started asking you. I was like, "Why now? Like,
Uh-huh.
what made you come back? Like, what?"
Well, talking to the Lord about this and
And I
still
think that you
us
even
dealing
said
with
something
stuff.
like, I've been dealing with all this stuff, and I feel like you're really, really pure, and I feel like I'm not. And even though the Lord has been talking to me about that, like that's been something that's kept me from moving forward with you. And I was like, okay. Because I think too, like, honestly, I think it's a grace from the Lord that has been on my life. The vast majority of my life is to be with somebody and not resent their past
Hmm.
for being messy. Um, like even though I knew that was your past, like that didn't ever really scare me or like make me feel weird.
Yeah.
Um, and so, when you were like, yeah, I've been through all this stuff, and I'm like, yeah, but that's not who you are anymore.
Yeah.
What does that have to do with anything? And you were like, yeah, but it does. I'm like, nah, it actually doesn't. Like. And so I think that there was that part for me too, that the Lord had been talking to me about, you know, yes, you represent purity, but like, in marriage, how Um, like the wife represents
Yep.
the church,
hmm
and
Christ and the groom, the bride, or the
thank you.
husband,
Yes.
or the Christ. I'll get the I'll get that someday.
Sorry, guys. Yeah. The picture of marriage is a representation of Christ and his church.
Yes.
And so, I just like the Lord had kind of impressed upon me from the beginning that like there's a lot about our relationship that speaks to the redemption that's possible, and like
Yep.
when somebody comes to Christ, like they're literally made to be a new person
Yes.
and their past is not counted against them, you know. And so, I'm in ministry school that preaches that every day and I'm like, yeah, give me all the broken people. But um but I think that that was something that for me, I'm like, oh, this is a really great gift of redemption that like
Yeah.
the Lord wants to give you through my life. Not that makes me sound kind of 2020, but um there definitely were some elements of it that were redeeming for you.
Yes.
Um
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. So I started asking you questions, and next thing I know,
Finally.
I'm like, wait a minute.
No, literally, it was like night and day.
Yeah.
Because you were like, hey, can we FaceTime? Hey, can we do this? Hey, and I was like, oh, this is what it's like when he's actually like, I'm
Interest.
trying to figure out who you are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's when I started really asking questions, trying to figure out who you
Yeah.
were. You were answering things, and I'm like, wait a minute, who are you? I'm like, wait, you want this? Wait, you're like this? Wait, you're musically inclined? Wait, you like you want the homestead vibes, you lift weights, you all the things. I'm like, wait a minute, who are you?
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
was like, I've literally been here this whole time. Welcome to reality.
Well, yeah, and this was right before you were about to cross country again with
Yeah.
your dad
Yeah.
to go back to school.
Literally like within a few days.
Yeah. And I remember asking, like, oh, when
You're
you coming back
coming.
through or
Yeah.
whatever? And you're like, well, actually, we're planning on going north instead. And I was like, oh,
I was like, why? You're like, well, I was gonna see like if you were planning on coming through. Well, and I had said we're leaving after the weekend
hmm.
is over. Like we're leaving on Monday, so we'd be going through on Monday, but we're not gonna
Oh.
be.
And I said, of
And you're
course
like,
you're coming
of
through on a
course you're
Monday
going
again.
through on a Monday. I was like, I tried to stop a time before. You're like, well, I was working. I was like, okay, I don't think that's the real reason, but you had said at that point too, well, I was gonna say if you're coming through, I'll get work off so that I could
Yeah.
meet you.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. And at that point, I had we had FaceTimed, we had talked for a while. Our first FaceTime, you trauma dumped everything on me.
Did I?
Yes. And I think you were kind of like, here's all my stuff.
Can you handle it?
Can you handle it? And I was like, okay, okay. Yep.
That's funny. I don't remember
Uh-huh. Yeah. No, you were just like, here's all my stuff. And I was like, I don't know if he's trying to like intimidate me or like figure out if I'm gonna like wig out or what's happening, but like, okay,
That's funny.
it's all your stuff.
That's funny because that's what I did when I was younger, when I'd
Yeah, I
meet
know.
people.
Yeah.
Here I am, please don't reject me. But I think
Yeah.
this time probably would have been more of a, can you handle how messy I am?
Yeah. Because you were like, here's everything that's going on and so I talked to my dad because we were planning on taking a different route.
hmm
And I was like, Dad, I've been talking to this guy. Up until that point I had told some friends about you, but like I hadn't told my parents at all. My dad always drives me back out to California. So I don't have to do the drive back by myself. And I was like, listen, I've been talking to this guy. He's willing to take work off to meet me. To be honest, I'd kind of like to meet him in person to see if I'm going to waste my time or not.
hmm
because I knew once I'd be back in California, it'd be a long time before we could potentially meet in person.
Yep.
And so I was like, I'd rather just meet in person now and then rule out if I think this is going to go anywhere or not.
Yeah.
I was like, hey, do you mind if we switch our route, go through St. Louis? I can meet with this guy for an hour or two, and then we can go back to the route that we had planned.
Yeah.
And he was like, it's gonna add time to our trip. And I was like, yeah, I know. It's gonna add an hour or two. He was like, you really want to meet this guy? I was like, yeah, I'd really like to. And he was like, okay. And so we switched it. And I think I texted you and I was like, okay, we'll be through St. Louis on Monday. And you were like, what?
Well, I was surprised because usually I'm the one going out of my way for other people. Um, that had been my in my history, and so the fact that you were willing to completely change your trip and come through to meet me felt pretty significant.
Yeah.
Um, and so you came through. I ended up not having work that day anyway because of how ridiculous things were going with my job.
Yeah.
And so I was like, all right, well, I'm free anyway, so it's not like I have to ask. I tell them I'm leaving
But you
because
would have.
I would have. I'd have been like, sorry, I gotta take off or whatever, and it'd have been fine. But um, yeah, we met, and I was like, okay, this girl's really pretty. She's
Okay, guys,
awesome. She's
let's be real.
fun.
Up to that point, he didn't really know what I looked like. And
I,
I was pretty intentional about that.
yeah. To be fair, cameras don't always tell the tale.
Yes, it's true.
Yeah,
And I wore a lot of like
baggy stuff.
oversized
Mhm.
t-shirts and stuff. And
Yeah,
so, like, there wasn't a way for you to know.
yeah,
But part of that was super intentional on my part because I'm like, are you actually interested in me?
yeah.
Or,
Yeah, but part of me also too was like, are you actually into fitness? Or are you one of
are you just one of
those,
those girls?
short girls that it looks like you could be, but could also not be? I mean,
Yeah.
let's be honest, like
Yeah.
maybe there's a little bit of vanity there, but there's also the
No, it's,
legitimate
I
like,
mean, you have to be
okay, are you
attracted to someone.
actually, yeah,
Yeah.
and are you actually healthy and are you actually trying to
Yeah.
pursue,
Yeah.
and so I was like, okay, all right.
Showed up. You were like, oh,
Saw Shorty. So she shows up and we have a good time.
you got coffee
Yeah,
and
we chatted for a while and then I threw
you
on the
asked me.
back of the motorcycle.
Yep, you asked me if I wanted to ride the motorcycle, and I
Yeah,
said, yes, I do.
so there was a park like 2 blocks away and I gave her my helmet and we rode over there and
Yep.
we walked around for maybe another half hour, 45, and then I took you back to your dad, which,
You met my dad that day,
you know,
which I was kind of surprised because you had taken me back to the car.
hmm
And I was
he
like,
wasn't
hey,
there.
my dad's a couple blocks away.
So
I'm gonna walk over and meet him.
I don't mind walking you
You're
there.
like, why don't I just walk you over to your dad and all?
Yeah.
And I was like,
I was
you
like,
want to meet
first of
my
all,
dad today?
I don't know if this area is sketchy or not, so
Right.
I'm not gonna make you walk to your
Yeah.
dad by yourself around here.
Yeah.
Um,
But
and
also, I didn't know. I'm like, is this? I don't want it to be weird. Where I'm like, I want you to meet my dad on our first date.
of course, but I was like, it's fine,
You
I
volunteered.
don't
You didn't
care.
care.
And so I met him, and I gave them the best route to go through Wyoming. And
Oh, and it was gorgeous. That
yeah,
was like one of the highlights of our trip.
yeah, definitely helped me with winning her dad over for sure.
Yeah.
And then we talked constantly every day. Um,
Yeah.
Yeah, the probably the next significant thing that felt significant was I'm not the type that had ever bought a girl flowers before, and flowers were significant for you.
Yeah.
And she had bought some from the store, and like a couple days later, they were already dead, and she was bummed about it.
Yeah, it was lame.
And I had the idea, I was like, I should send her flowers.
Yeah.
Funny enough, I sent her flowers. I ordered them. They were just a mix of flowers, but she wasn't going to be home, and I found that out, and I was like, all right, well, I guess I'll cancel that order and I'll try again a different day.
Yeah.
So then when I did try, I found out that roses weren't actually that expensive, and I was like, I'll send some roses. And that ended up being significant for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, the Lord speaks to me a lot through flowers. And I had gotten uh somebody had been praying for me, I don't know, back in February, January that year, and felt like the Lord was had given them this picture of
Yeah.
um the Lord giving me flowers, and then um she said, "Actually, I feel like your husband is gonna bring you roses too." And
Which they're not supposed to do that,
they're
right?
not supposed to do that. And this girl, I knew of her, but like we didn't know each other at all. And at that point, like I felt really, really hopeless about finding my husband. I was like, I'm basically a grandma at the ripe old age of 24. It's freaking out. My eggs are drying up. They're not. Um, but she had just given me this word from the Lord that was like, hey, your husband's coming. And he's gonna learn how to treat you from the Lord. And the Lord gives you roses, and I feel like your husband's gonna give you roses, and so I hadn't told Thomas any of that because there was actually several words that I had gotten from people, and from the Lord directly about what my husband would be like. And I didn't tell you any of those things. And I had told the Lord when we started dating, I was like, hey, I'm not telling him any of this, but I need every single one of these to line up. I need, and I can't tell him anything. Like it has to be you. Like
Yep.
that was one of kind of the
Stipulations.
measuring,
Yeah.
yeah, the measuring sticks of like, is this right? Is it not?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And so me being the guy that doesn't ever buy any flowers,
those
I
new
bought her
roses.
flowers.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah. I think at that point I was like, I don't even know that we were technically
I think we were.
we were official at that point.
Yeah.
I don't know. Is that what the kids call it these
That
days?
was pretty quick.
Official?
Official. Probably not.
Yeah.
They probably say something stupid like yeet.
Yeet? They do not say yeet.
Sorry, that was a few generations ago, apparently.
You have aged yourself there. Wow. No. Um, but I think pretty quickly after we had met in person, I was like, "Hey, are you?" You had said something to me, and I was like, "Are you trying to be my boyfriend?"
Yep.
You're like, "Yeah." And I think shortly after that is when you're like, "Hey, just so you know, I'm all in."
Yeah, it didn't take me long. Because once I realized who you were, part of me was like, well, if you are who you are, but I was like, no, I'm gonna trust it. I think you're exactly who I think you are. And
Hmm.
if you are this person, then I'm in and I'm down.
Hmm.
So that's when soon after I
You flew out to California
flew out
in
to
September.
after breaking my ankle,
Yeah,
which
that was a
funny
bum.
enough, it was like the Lord told you that something happened before I even got a chance to call you,
Yeah.
which
Yep.
is pretty cool. And then yeah, and then I flew out there. We had a great time
Hmm.
out here, I guess now.
Yeah.
We had a great time, and it was your first week back in class or something, I think. And
You came to school with me. Yep.
mhm,
Got to meet everybody. It was really fun.
yeah,
We had just been starting the year, so I was going into my final year at school,
yep,
and um was my job for the year was I was under one of the pastors of the school, and I was mentoring a bunch of students. So um or a bunch being nine um for the year.
yeah,
And so you got to meet a lot of them, and um yeah.
yeah, yeah. So that was really good, and while I was broken, we'd FaceTime every day for hours on end, just chit
Yeah.
chatting, talking about everything.
Yep.
And then,
I came to meet you in St. Louis.
yes, but I think we were already talking about me moving here at some point. We were trying to figure out the logistics of that. And I had already bought tickets to come out here for your birthday and for Thanksgiving.
Yeah, because they were on the same day that year.
Yeah. And you were like, why don't I come see you
It
before
was
then?
like, I really miss you. I want to see you. I don't want to wait. And so I
So
was like, I'll just buy a ticket and go.
yeah, so she stayed with JT and Molly, and
Yeah, that was amazing to get to meet them.
yeah, we did some fun little things around
Yeah.
St. Louis area.
Had the best burgers ever.
Yes,
They're so good.
some of the best
If you're
burgers.
ever in,
Yeah,
where
St.
is
Louis.
it?
It's 19 something or other uh bourbon. Uh, I just told JT this earlier, actually. Bourbon something. It's like a
It's like Bourbon
steakhouse,
Street, is it?
maybe.
I don't know.
Anyways, I texted it to him. It was House of Bourbon,
House
1933
of
House of
Bourbon.
Bourbon.
If you're ever in the St. Louis area,
Yes.
go out of your way to go get burgers
It's
at
on,
the House of Bourbon.
yeah, it's on the Illinois side.
It's amazing.
So good. We rode my motorcycle around, took you down one of the beautiful roads. It was a
Hmm.
good time.
We went on a double date with JT and Molly.
Yes.
That was really fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
JT grilled you a little bit.
Yeah, he did. He did. But I was okay with it.
What do you want with my friend?
Like, why do you like Thomas? I was like,
Oh,
well, and then I think I didn't stop talking for like 10 minutes.
well, it was a good couple minutes for sure.
Maybe not 10, maybe like 5. And I was like, does that answer your question? And he was like, yeah, yes, it does.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a really good
So,
time.
yeah.
Thankfully by then I was walking again.
Yep.
And then I was just working to save up money to move. Came
Hmm.
out here for your birthday. That was awesome.
Yep.
Um,
We went out to the coast that trip, and
mhm.
yeah, we got to experience a lot. You got to meet more of my people here, and
Yeah.
we did Thanksgiving at my pastor's house,
Hmm.
and so you got to be around them more. They got to be around you more and get to know you a bit better, and
Yeah, it was great.
that was fun.
It's great. And then come Christmas, I bolted from St. Louis and headed east.
To Ohio,
I
where
met,
I'm from.
hung out with her family for the better part of 2 weeks.
Yep. He ran the gauntlet. He met everyone in my family.
Yep.
My immediate family, my extended family,
Yep. I was
my
exhausted.
friends.
I was trying to figure out the dynamics
Oh yeah. It was a tough trip.
a little bit.
Honestly, if I could do it over again, I don't know that I would have done it the same way. I think I
Yeah.
would have done it differently.
Yeah.
But
That's okay. Um, Took her home because 2 hours away is my family, so she got to meet them.
hmm
And then we drove cross country and made our way here
Yep.
to
Stayed with
Reading.
friends along the way, which was really fun.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
and we made it back to Reading.
4 days, 5 days later, something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
And
So that would have
eventually,
been the
that
January of
was
24.
yeah, very beginning of the year, right
Yep.
after New Year's, we
Yep.
we took off.
You were still living in the van at that point.
So I lived on a property about
Friends of ours.
20 minutes away from here.
Yep.
And eventually got a job, and we just kind of
It was so nice to be in person at that point because up until that point we had just stayed in long distance
mhm,
and just gotten to see each other for a week every now and then.
yeah,
But then to actually like
yeah,
be around each other all the time,
which was a little jarring for you because I was a
it
little
was a little bit,
you
yeah.
you were learning how I am.
Yeah.
I felt like I had a good rein on how you were,
Yeah.
but I didn't end up being too intense. Didn't end up being too much for her. Yeah, and then we mostly just kept pursuing connection.
Hmm.
One of the things that we ended up doing once I proposed, I guess.
No, we started it before you proposed. The
Oh,
class.
that's right. Yeah, yeah. So we had already had intention of getting married. I just wasn't sure when we were going to propose, and started doing a class. I felt like we were doing great because I was like, I've done this dog and pony show. I think we're doing great. And you were like, I don't know, are we doing really good? Like, are we actually? And so we went to a sort of a pre-marriage type class, and it was basically just teaching communication skills, and we realized real quick that like, oh, we're already sort of doing some of this stuff,
Hmm.
and we're actually doing a lot better than you like we both thought we were,
Hmm.
and it was great. It's been redeeming for me because It hasn't been a turbulent relationship. We haven't fought at all.
Yeah.
We've had our little bickerments on little things here and there, but we don't fight.
Mhm.
Um we don't really clash over a lot, you know. The biggest thing that we really get into it about is the fact that I'm not as neat as you are. And but we deal with it, you know. I do
Yeah.
my best to pick up the slack and you give me
Yeah.
grace, and
Yep.
that's all been beautiful. And yeah, I think the biggest thing was probably you know, her family had only met me the one time really. So they weren't totally sure about me, but you know,
Hmm.
we end up going into marriage week. I don't know if there's anything
Well,
in
you
there that we
proposed
should
in March.
post in March, so
Um,
almost a year ago now.
and then we basically were just doing life here, planning
Yep,
a wedding.
yep.
Um,
Just kind of a lot for you because she was finishing her school, and
my autoimmune stuff was kind of flaring up again because of all the stress.
and then you went right from school into wedding planning.
Yeah, we got married 6 months to the day after we got engaged.
Yep,
So it was a relatively short engagement, but I was flying back and forth to Ohio because we got married in Ohio,
yep,
but we were living in California, and you were still living in the van
yes,
until I flew to Ohio for the few weeks before we got married. Then you finally moved in here, and
yes.
Reading is hot in the summer.
Very.
It's like 125 some days.
Praise God, the one week that it got up over
Like into
like
the one,
120,
yeah, we
I
were able to stay inside.
was able to stay at a person's house that I was watching their dog.
Yeah,
Um, but 110 degrees at night
it's
is
miserable.
not easy to sleep in.
Yeah,
So I was struggling quite a bit too
yeah.
for that reason. And then the month before the wedding, you flew out to Ohio, so I got to move
Hmm.
in here finally.
Yep,
And then yeah, we had the most incredible wedding.
we did.
It was so beautiful. Nothing went wrong.
The day of,
And
yeah.
yeah, and people, you know, like a lot of times the people have told us that they absolutely adored it, that it was just it was a great time and
Yep.
all that. And it was great because the commingling of families and friends
Hmm.
gave more context to,
Yeah.
you know, my family, more context for your family, and
Hmm.
it was just really beautiful.
Hmm.
And so we've been married now since September,
Yeah, 5 months yesterday.
5 months, yes,
Yep.
which is crazy.
Yep.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that's really cool is we don't do it every week, but we try to every week do a touch point or like a check-in
Hmm.
where we go through a list of questions, things like are there ways that I could have loved you better this week?
Hmm.
Or was there anything that was there anything that
Smoke is growling.
I doubt they'll be able to hear it. It's
Okay.
fine. You're hungry, huh? Are there any ways that you feel we need to improve communication? Like what were
Yeah.
this week's dreams? Let's see, are the things that you've learned or are excited about? What's the Lord talking to you about?
Hmm.
Um, what's something that made you feel the most loved?
Hmm.
And
When did we feel the most connected?
yeah, things like
Or
that.
was there anything that hurt you that we didn't that you didn't bring up this week? So it just kind of like it keeps us keeping like really short accounts. If
Yeah.
there's ever offense or anything, like I mean, we've gotten so good at just bringing it up in the moment. I
Mhm.
think both of us are just direct enough that we're like, "Hey,
Yeah.
this is really bothering me." Usually it doesn't last days.
Yeah. And that's
Hasn't always been like that, but
one of the things that really helps is in that class, one of the things that they gave us language for is, you know, my emotions don't make you a bad guy and your
yeah.
emotions don't make me a bad guy. So if you
Yeah.
feel something, that doesn't mean that I did something
I'm a
wrong.
bad person. Yeah.
Yeah. Or that I'm a bad person.
Yep.
It's that we can feel our emotions.
Yeah.
I could also probably have a missed perception.
Mhm.
I could just have assumed something wrong.
Mhm.
There was a moment recently where she was feeling overwhelmed about
Mhm.
overwhelmed about some stuff, and because of the context, I thought she was mad that I hadn't gotten dishes done the day before, and I was like, oh no. Turns out I was just completely wrong. She was going through a whole slew of other things, and I
I
just
was mad at myself more than anything. I wasn't even mad at you at all.
exactly. And that's, a perfect case in point where I feel like most people would have immediately been like, oh, well, you're pissed at me, so I'm just gonna be pissed at you and take it out on you or whatever.
Yeah.
But we were able to talk about it immediately and be like,
Yeah.
hey, like, what's going on? You told me, and I'm like, oh, I thought you were mad at me. And she's like,
Yeah.
no, I wasn't at all. And we're able to be honest with each other enough about things that
Mhm.
we don't have to fight about it.
Yeah.
And I'm not gonna assume to know what you think or what you mean. Like
Hmm.
if I think that you're being snarky with me, then I am gonna downright ask, like, can you clarify what you're talking about, or can you whatever? There have
Yeah.
been many times where I would say something and she'd be like, will you clarify that? Because that feels hard, or that feels, aggressive or mean or
Yeah.
whatever. And I'd be like, well, this is what I mean. You're like, oh, that's not what I thought at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
We've had to get
that's,
really good at the art of like asking questions and being curious instead of creating a story in our head and
yeah,
like keeping that narrative going. I think that's another tool that they gave us in that class is like oftentimes, especially when you're in a relationship with somebody and you're with them every day, like
yeah,
you can start telling yourself stories about the other person that aren't true, but they're true in your mind. And so,
yeah. When they did this, this is what
yeah,
they
they
really
meant
meant.
this and now it means this and really
They're
they
really just trying to slight me.
right. Right. And we've gotten good at being like, "Oh, that's what you meant?" Oh, to be honest with you, I've been telling myself that like this is what you were doing. And I'm really sorry.
Yeah,
And then it gives the other person the opportunity to be like, "Oh yeah, no, not at all." And so honestly, there's a lot most of our conflict, so to speak, because it's not that we haven't had conflict.
exactly.
But most of it we can talk through and we realize it's just a misunderstanding because both of us have the same goal of we want to be connected and we want to be on the same team.
Yes.
And so whenever we come up against something, instead of going, okay, it's me versus you, there has to be one person who wins and one person who loses. We approach it as how can we both win?
Yeah.
How can we win as a team? What do we do for the good of our marriage? How do we put that first?
Mhm.
Um, but I think also we've always had a foundation of like, hey, what can I do to serve you? Like,
Yes.
if this isn't good for you, that means it's not good for me because it's not good for us.
Yeah, we both hold to the our foundation for what marriage is first um, a reflection of Christ and the bride,
Yeah.
as which is ultimate humility, and second, it's being servants to each other the best we can,
Hmm.
and then, like you said, after that, it's attempting to always be on the same team.
Yeah.
We're never trying to fight each other.
Yeah.
We're never trying to disengage from the other person.
Hmm.
We're always trying to seek to understand. And I know that there's going to be some people that are like, well, you're divorced and you guys have only been married for so long and it's going to get harder. The guy who married us, him and his wife, we want to have them on this podcast at some point, but they have never like gotten into any real fights as far as like they've communicated to us, and they've told us straight up, like, the honeymoon phase doesn't have to end. You can actually be on each other's, you can be on the same team and you can work through everything and stay, partners, stay,
Hmm.
you know, on the same path, on the same, whatever. Like, it doesn't actually, and I believe that. I wholeheartedly believe
Yeah.
that. And that's something we're passionate about, is working towards that. And I guess, like we said, it's not that we don't have conflict. We've just learned to manage it well. And something for, I guess, for single people is that we've both done a lot of emotional work prior to being married that
Yeah.
allows us to be in this place. Because if I hadn't done my work, then I could still be super short fused about things and go off on her about
Hmm.
stupid stuff. if she hadn't done her work, she could probably be very snarky with me about things that come up. But we intentionally did a lot of work on ourselves before
Hmm.
we met each other
Yeah.
that allows us to engage with each other now in very healthy ways
Hmm.
instead of unhealthy ways. And that's not to say that people that have been married for years can't circumnavigate their unhealthy ways and then move back into um, the honeymoon phase, but that it just takes intention. It takes, and I believe that wholeheartedly. You know, I don't care what people say about us being only married for so long. Like, I believe that. I've also witnessed it in other people's marriages, and
Hmm.
um, the naysayers can be the naysayers, but we're out to,
I think too, I mean, we've set up such a stable foundation of communication and trust
vulnerability.
and vulnerability that um I think as long as we keep that going, it's kind of it would be tough to let things stack up
Yes.
unless we were intentionally not bringing things up. Um, um, as life gets busy and things change, like of course it brings up new obstacles, but
Yeah.
at the end of the day, like our priority is first the Lord and then each other, and
Yes.
then everybody else comes after that.
Yeah.
And so, you know, protecting our connection above all else, as long as we keep that the goal and we work through things together, it makes it hard
Yeah.
for things to stack up and create resentment and stuff. But,
Yeah.
you know, there are definitely hard moments that we've had.
And we'll continue to have.
Things, yeah, yeah, things that pop up out of the blue or, things that trigger each of us. But I think um, both of us have made the commitment to, like, I really want to love the other person. And it's really hard to be snarky with somebody when you see them open up and they're like, actually, I feel really scared right now, and this is what's going on. And this happened in my past, and you said this thing and it made me think of this. Like the number of times I've had those moments and you've been like, oh, and you just like come and like hold me and hug me and there's so much there that like I feel like grace for each other can cover
Yeah.
as long as we're not viewing each other as enemies.
Exactly. Exactly. And
You're
then,
not here to hurt me.
yeah,
Like,
that's never going to be the case.
yeah.
And so, as long as we continue to believe that, and we never come to the point of being like, oh, you did that just to hurt me, or you did that on
Yeah.
purpose, and you did this or whatever. Like, I'd almost guarantee you it's 9 times out of 10, the majority, like, if somebody's out to quote unquote hurt the other person, it's purely because they've misunderstood what the other person was
Yeah,
intending
it not intentional.
and they didn't
Yeah.
communicate. So yeah, I mean, we may not be quote unquote relationship gurus or professionals or
Yeah.
whatever. I think these are just practical tools that people that have done it longer than us
Mm,
have said work, have shown that work, and it's just something that we're
yeah.
passionate about. And so we're not going to just talk about it as if we're the ones that know it. We're gonna like this is one of the things that I do want to talk about on here is healthy relationships, and so we'll talk to people that have done it really well
For a
um,
long time.
for a long time,
Yeah.
like
Long
Susan and
Susan.
Paul,
Yep.
and
Yep.
other people, and we'll talk about you know biblical identity and masculinity and femininity and
Yep.
all that stuff because we're both passionate about it. So much so that maybe who knows, we'll do a spin-off podcast of the Neals someday.
We'll see.
I love you.
I love you too.
This is nice.
Yep.
Little trip down memory lane.
Yep.
Yeah,
I like that.
it's always fun.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You figured it out eventually.
I did.
You're a smart boy.
I got there, and it's the best thing. Not too much for you, and you're awesome.
Yep.
You have a good time.
Yep.
Also, we try to have fun.
Yeah, yeah, you do try to have fun.
Yep,
Life is too short to not have fun, for it to
exactly.
be terrible all the time.
Exactly. Gotta get along.
Yeah.
You being funny helps. I can't be the only
Yeah.
one.
Oh my gosh.
Awesome. Well, thanks guys for listening. Um,
Tune in next time to hear Thomas talk about.
I don't know which one's next.
Oh,
I've already recorded like four others,
tune
at
in
least,
next week for the
maybe five.
mystery podcast.
Whichever one's next.
Who knows what it will be?
I've got a handful and the queue ready, which is great because gets me ahead of it.
It's all queued up.
Yeah. So I think I said in the last one, of course, that was because we recorded back in like November or something.
Forever ago.
That we were gonna try to do two episodes or an episode every 2 weeks, but I think I can do it once a week. That's the plan.
He's gotten ambitious.
Like I said, I've already recorded four other ones, and I've got another one later today, and I've got two this week.
They're waiting in the wings.
Another one next week. I'm gonna be so far ahead of myself. I'm gonna be like, this isn't gonna get released for about a month and a half.
Just wait until
It's good. I feel like this is gonna be
yeah.
this,
It'll be
this is
good.
gonna be a good podcast.
When life gets
Excited.
busy, you'll have some.
That's gonna help too.
Yep.
But I feel it important to pursue this thing right now, so I'm gonna do it.
Cheers.
Love you.
Love you too.
All right, podcast, internet people, do the subscribe things or whatever, and I'll talk to you next time.
To the podcasters.
Deuces.